Learning how to read inspectionally might change your reading career forever. I think it's one of the single most underrated and undervalued skills that exists in the reading world at all, and most people don't know how to do it or even know what it is. Inspectional reading is the art of being able to decipher whether a book is worth it in the first place. Because there's a lot of terrible books out there. There's a lot of books written poorly, written with bitterness, written with money in mind, and a lot of these books dominate the shelves in our libraries and in our bookshops. And our ability as readers to navigate through that and find the books that A, apply to us and give us some personal value, and B, the ones that not only do that but are well written in that sense, that they actually fulfill their job properly, that they are worth looking into more deeply. And if we as readers can find those books using the skill of inspectional reading, then we have a massive advantage, because we're not wasting our time reading books that we just feel uninspired by and end up quitting them. And we only find the books that really do truly help us. And yes, it takes some amount of time to be able to learn how to read inspectionally. And of course it takes practice, but once we have those skills, we can pick up any book and with just a simple 6-step process, go through those and find out, does this apply to me? Is this the book I want to read? Will this help my life? What is the author trying to say? Is it relevant? And those skills are immensely valuable because it's the prelude to the next level, the next stages of reading. If you remember, we talked about them earlier. There's inspectional reading, analytical reading, and syntopical reading. And in order to access the two top ones, which are concerned with the most, we have to know, well, which books do we even read to do those with? So we have to begin somewhere. We have to find the books in the first place. So learning these 6 steps will help you find the books right for you and books written well for you. And that will benefit your reading career so much. It's unreal. So the first thing to analytical reading is, when we pick up a book, we want to know more about it. And the obvious first step to that is the title. We read the title and the subtitle of the book. And of course that's needs no thought, we do that anyway. But to do that, we do that in order to find out the aim and scope of the author. Are they writing about something we're interested in or something we're looking for? What's the scope? What's the angle they're taking? Is it a very narrow angle on a very particular issue in the field, or is it a sort of broad view on the wider picture? For example, the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. That's a classic. We can very clearly see the scope there. It's the decline and fall. It's not the rise, it's the decline and fall. And instantly there we have we've learned a lot about the book in that small subtitle. We see the exact scope the author's trying to take. And that's the obvious first step to do that sort of thing. The next thing you might do is study the contents page. And of course this is invaluable because it gives us a precise structure of the book, what we're to expect in each chapter. We see, well, each chapter's probably a main point, each chapter's probably a main argument, maybe it's a different time period. It all depends on the book, of course, but by studying the contents page, we're allowed to see the anatomy of the book, the structure, the skeleton, and that can help us decipher what it's about. And it's really very important for knowing what you're getting into. And of course nowadays books tend to have more discrete chapters. They're a bit more mysterious and kind of unclear at first, but it's worth checking it out anyway. Older books in the past typically have contents that are kind of like paragraphs almost, where they're very precise in what they lay out, and those ones are useful, but nowadays it's more mysterious and it can be less useful, but it's still worth a shot. The third thing, which many readers don't do, and I didn't do this for ages, but is actually checking the index. And the index is the set at the back of the book with all the keywords, and it tells you where to find them. And at first that might seem useless. It's like, well, I only need the index if I'm looking for a specific thing for my research project, let's say. But no, actually, it's more useful than that. If you notice terms or words that appear multiple times, they have a lot of entries in the index. Well, that can lead us to think, well, hold on, maybe that's an important term. Maybe that term is part of the lexicon, I guess, of the book, the main vocabulary. And clearly it's important then. So it's worth checking the index and finding the words that appear regularly, which allows us to infer that it's somewhat important, and then we can even go to those pages and check out what's being said about those words. And chances are they are important paragraphs or sentences in the author's argument. So it's worth having a look at the index and looking at those pages. And of course, step 4 is the blurb. That's obvious. It's the bit we should all be reading, really. We turn to the back or the cover page, and it's the blurb. It's essentially the neat summary of the author's argument and his book, sorry. And good blurbs, which should be what you're looking for, will summarize the author's points neatly and give you a sort of concise overview of the book. And sometimes the blurb is all you need. Sometimes the blurb is very clear, it's very precise, transparent, and it just tells you all you need to know about the book and all you can expect to find in the book. Sometimes they're more discreet and more cryptic and you only find reviews, or sometimes there's no blurb at all, and that can be challenging. And sometimes it's just puffery. It's just like loads of 5-star reviews and positive comments about the author. And in that case, you have to take it with a pinch of salt, but it's always worth looking at the blurb, because sometimes it saves you all the rest of the process and just, okay, well, this is what I'm looking for. I know what I'm looking for, and this book, it gives exactly what I want to me. Or it doesn't, and maybe, well, okay, this book's not for me. The blurb talks about something completely different and something that I don't care about at all. And in that case, good. We've saved our time, we've discarded the book. Great. The fifth thing is actually delving into the book itself, into the meat of the book, and finding out key chapters, and not only key chapters, but the key arguments within those chapters. Because ultimately we're looking for the author's central running message throughout the book, his key points, and within those his main arguments he uses to back that up. And that can sound tricky at first, because it's like, well, where do I start in this big 300-page book? How am I supposed to find the main arguments? Well, it's actually sort of simpler than you might think, because loads of books tend to follow the same pattern. And if you look at the paragraphs at the end of each chapter, it's usually a conclusion of the chapter, and it sort of wraps up the main argument neatly and packages it there for you. So I recommend you have a look at those chapters, those paragraphs especially, and that will allow you to get the gist of the chapter. And if you read them all, you'll get the gist of the whole book's argument wrapped together. Otherwise, you can just flick through, and this sort of ties into the last step, the last tip, is you can flick through the chapters and find out the key paragraphs and the key lines, because they're not only at the end, but they can also be sprinkled in the middle. And you'll notice that the important lines, the important sentences that really hammer home the point of a paragraph and a chapter, they can be found typically at the top of the paragraph or at the bottom. So usually you have a paragraph, and the first sentence is the points they're making. The middle of the paragraph typically is the flesh of the argument, the substance of it, the details, the add-ons, the stories, the experiences. And then you get to the last sentence of that paragraph, and that's sort of hammering home the main points and summarizing it again. And so if you can do that with the concluding paragraphs of the chapter, and also some of the important paragraphs within the book itself, you can really easily and quickly build a sort of picture of the book. You can build a framework that you can see it in, and sort of understand the core themes and the running message throughout. And of course, that's not easy by any means. That's definitely a skill you have to learn and practice and have a go at in bookshops. Let's say you pick up a random book and try and inspect it and see if it's worth it for you. But then after some practice with that, you can really be adept at just choosing the right ones for you and deciding whether it's worth it for you. And once you've done that, you really have the power to avoid wasted time and go straight to the next step of reading it analytically, which we'll be discussing down the line. And that's really where you get the value from, the analytical reading. That's where we increase our understanding of the world, we increase our wisdom, we increase our skills and our ability. But to do that, we have to find the right books in the first place. We need to inspectionally read them in the first place. So if you stick around, we'll discuss analytical reading down the line and how we can benefit our lives through reading and ultimately fulfill the original goal of trying to get better at reading in the first place. So I hope you enjoyed this one and stick around for that.